The alternative science YouTube community is under attack. This time though, it's not from any of the usual suspects. Not from pervasive academia hero worship and groupthink. Not from the YouTube algorithm misattributing all science videos to conspiracy organizations with unpalatable political motives. Not even from government pressure. The alternative science community is under attack by a YouTuber.
Ahoy hoy, ahoy hoy, ahoy hoy.
This is Nate, aka Planarwalk, a YouTuber from Australia who for the past 4 years has dedicated his channel to debunking flat earthers and other science creators on the platform who present conclusions that deviate from the conventions of academia. But while Planarwalk presents himself as an authority on a diverse span of scientific disciplines, upon inspection his arguments lack true rigor and rarely rise above the level of sanctimonious posturing. Now, this alone is really nothing new. For centuries, all scientists have dealt with prejudice from conventional experts and deferring laypeople alike. However, I think this situation deserves special attention. Because unlike the classic case of an academia power structure being wielded against wrongthink, this time it's an individual minor internet celebrity with growing social pull being reinforced by the algorithm to pump out videos ridiculing good faith investigators just because they're different. Because Planarwalk is an individual and, to be honest, a very talented and hardworking creator on the platform, albeit presently misguided, I think presenting him and his audience with a compelling argument against his uncharitable treatment of all scientists could go a long way in fostering a more healthy environment for transformational scientific ideas on the internet. This is the Planarwalk Rant. Planarwalk for the past 4 years has taken on all kinds of investigative YouTubers, from flat earthers, astrologists, creationists, vaccine skeptics, and even has branched off into more typical categories of punching bags like Karens, transphobes, and Christians. But the bulk of his channel is geared toward debunking anyone and everyone who presents flat earth conjectures and hypotheses. Now, flat earth, for those who are unfamiliar, is the premise that the earth is not a globe, but instead a globally flat manifold. This idea was generally accepted in pre-antiquity, but fell out of favor for the spherical model. However, due to a number of factors, including social media, political populism, and perceived inequality, flat earth saw a massive resurgence in the past decade as a rebellion against the ivory tower of academia and expertise. In a world where we rely on experts to operate government, build cellular communication networks, coordinate supply chains, deliver adequate healthcare, the observations and opinions of those experts shape our worldview. While the majority of the educated, or depending on your view, indoctrinated population views the flat earth schema as troglodytic to the highest degree, at its essence, flat earth is a desperate attempt to reclaim and democratize science, the one facet of the human experience that is supposed to hold universal truth. This is why I have such a problem with Planarwalk's overall approach to combating flat earthers. You see, independent of the validity of his argument, Planarwalk packages mainstream science into a hip product. Not only are his political views left-leaning and his scientific arguments reflective of modern academia, but he's well-spoken, personable, sarcastic, versed in memes. He also has a booming YouTube channel with a rapidly growing audience, which lends him credibility on the platform. These facets of his presentation have nothing to do with the logos of his arguments, and there's nothing wrong with how he's crafted persuasive power with his platform. However, Planarwalk uses that power to demean, belittle, and ridicule those who hold different views from him.
For people that don't like the earth being round, they sure do like circle jerking, don't they? Flat earthers being smart. Nathan Oakley, if you want your channel to do well, stop being a little bitch. I feel like I'm actually losing brain cells while watching this.
Again, independent from validity, what Planarwalk is doing to these researchers encapsulates the exact social conditions that birthed the modern flat earth movement in the first place. Condescension and derision will only serve to entrench these people in their beliefs, which themselves are a refuge from the mainstream. These flat earthers aren't all science deniers. Most are science skeptics who, rather than being spoon-fed conclusions from the academic elite, instead are taking observation and reason into their own hands. That's a good thing. In fact, that's what science is all about. Ceaselessly questioning and testing models of our universe to both discard incorrect ones and strengthen correct ones. Ridiculing those who question the status quo on the basis of it's the status quo is basically throwing away half of science. Beyond the fact that Planarwalk's mockery of flat earthers is counterproductive as it's part of a feedback loop that birthed the movement in the first place, from a broader perspective, there's historical precedent for his commentary approach to be suboptimal. And that is because throughout history, innovative ideas are crazy until they're innovative. One of the greatest tech entrepreneurs from the past decade, Elizabeth Holmes, has a quote that's very relevant here.
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
There's so many examples of ideas that seemed outlandish before being accepted into the mainstream. Continental drift, evolution, time cube, even heavier than air flight, which is now manifested into a multi-billion-dollar industry. More relevant to Planarwalk's math and physics crowd, think about how Georg Cantor was literally called a cancer on mathematics by his colleagues when he posited his theory on transfinite numbers. Today, every grad student taking measure theory will see Cantor's diagonal argument for the uncountability of the reals. In physics, the Copenhagen approach of quantum mechanics received fierce criticism for decades before being broadly accepted. Sometimes the best ideas don't come from incremental improvements on existing knowledge or the proverbial adage standing on the shoulders of giants. Sometimes the best ideas instead come from ostensible crackpots who are only appreciated as geniuses retroactively. And this crowd is the exact demographic that Planarwalk is ridiculing on his platform. That's not to say that a few bona fide wackos filter their way into this cohort, but from what I've seen, most of Planarwalk's targets are actually extremely gifted divergent thinkers. Ken Wheeler, Bill Gates, Mikey Smith. These guys certainly go against the intellectual grain, but their approach to science is so unlike anything that exists today that it would be a disservice to humanity to shame them into conformity. And after watching through Planarwalk's library of exposed videos, I think you'll find his adherence to convention clouds his ability to truly engage with the ideas he's bashing. This is most clear in his treatment of Professor Nigel Hands. This is Nigel Hands, a scientist, inventor, and former naval officer. Nigel is undoubtedly a charismatic and energetic presenter, but beyond that, he's given some of the most daring and unique scientific lectures that the internet has or maybe ever will see. His magnum opus is his 1 + 1 = 1 lecture, and this was the lecture Planarwalk chose to attempt to debunk. Now, there are a few things you should understand about the 1 + 1 = 1 presentation that Planarwalk omitted, likely by oversight. Most important is that because of Nigel's education background with a PhD in magnetology, the magnet is the universe in which his observations are made. On one hand, that might sound like kind of a cop-out to, after the fact, set conditions that validate his ostensibly ludicrous claims, but as you'll see, Nigel's framing of his conclusions in the context of the magnet is extremely consistent.
Because everything resides around a magnet, a lodestone. They've been here an awful lot longer than us humans.
From a mathematical analogy, you might think of his treatment of the magnet as like a subspace topology. Now, a follow-up to this is why should we even spend time discussing this mathematical system with properties so counterintuitive to our own experience? But this is like saying studying manifolds with non-zero curvature is useless because the interior angles of triangles in these spaces don't add up to 180 degrees like they do in Euclidean space. Or that Gaussian primes are dumb because 2 and 5 aren't prime as we'd expect in everyday usage of prime numbers. We study these things precisely for that reason, because universal truths stop being so universal when we change the rules of the universe. And that's not a concept just for frivolous mathematical tomfoolery. I mean, how much do electrical engineers owe the expanded universe of complex numbers? Or even think about how Dolly the sheep could never have been cloned without the Banach-Tarski paradox. All this to say that Planarwalk's approach to debunking Nigel's 1 + 1 = 1 lecture is immediately flawed because he is ignorant to the obvious context in which it is framed. In any case, here we go. Let's break down Planarwalk's criticism of Nigel's 1 + 1 = 1 lecture.
Now, I've looked into Nigel Cheese to see what kind of qualifications he has, and he claims to have a PhD in physics, a Masters of Information System Management, a Masters of Science, and a Bachelor of Science. The only issue is that I can't actually find any evidence outside of his own claims that he actually holds those qualifications.
Already you see how Planarwalk's criticism depends on ad hominem and an appeal to conventional power structures of academia, by first calling into question Nigel's academic credentials. Not only does this poison the well, so to speak, for an audience who is yet to hear Nigel speak, but it's not even true. Nigel holds a PhD in magnetology from the Open University. Moreover, why have you cropped out the certificate of duty as a physicist in the Royal Navy? Surely, by your standard, that should lend some credibility to his lecture.
For those who've actually followed me, my name's Nigel. I'm 50 something, at the best guess.
Now, to me, that sounded like he said, I'm 50 something, best guess. Does this guy not know his own age, or am I just mishearing things?
This is something I don't think it's worthwhile to joke about. At best, he just had trouble remembering his age on the spot, which when you get into your 50s like me and Nigel, I'm sure you'll be able to relate to that more. But it could also be because he was born in a rural area where birth certificates are very inconvenient to acquire, or because he was adopted. At the very least, fixating on Nigel's age has no place in discussing his scientific ideas. So now we get into the famous 1 + 1 = 1 line.
I said to a group of very, very high-level people, what's 1 and 1? 1 + 1. There's a question. Everybody like yourself turned around and said, oh, it's going to be 2. I said, no, it's not. You got it wrong. And they said, why? I said, because of this. As you can see, there's 2 magnets here. How many norths and how many souths? So I've put up in the room, on the board, a magnet with a north and a south. And I said, you have 1 north, you have 1 south, but you have 1 magnet. And they went, yeah, so what? What's the crazy about that? So you put another magnet next to it, you've still only got 1 south, 1 north and 1 magnet. So 1 + 1 = 1.
Okay, so I'm not going to pretend like Nigel's lecture is perfect. I mean, it's pretty revolutionary, but because he's operating on the fly, he's not as precise as he should be. And he causes a lot of confusion here because he isn't using labels on the board. He verbally indicates that he's talking about magnets.
I said, no, it's not. You got it wrong. And they said, why? I said, because of this.
More specifically, the category of magnets, but he really should have wrote that down because later in the lecture he adds degrees which follow different arithmetic rules.
Yes, putting 2 magnets together gives you 1 magnet, but those 2 magnets together is not the same as the 2 magnets each by themselves. For example, and I shouldn't have to say this, combining 2 magnets results in a magnet that is more powerful than each of the magnets individually. If it were the case that 2 magnets put together were just as powerful as the magnets individually, then I should be able to break a piece off this magnet, and that piece of the magnet should be just as powerful as the entire magnet. I've done that, and it's not.
This is where you're incorrect. Each one refers to the category of magnet, not a specific magnet with a specific weight. The idea that 1 + 1 = 1 in the magnet subspace applies if one magnet is the size of Jupiter and the other is a bar magnet. The result is still a magnet.
Take the spoon, for example. It's one object, right? Or is it billions and billions of objects which we call atoms? But at the end of the day, if I have a spoon and you give me another spoon, then I'm going to say that I have 2 spoons.
Well, obviously, because spoons do not have the same universal binding properties that magnets do. It's not like spoons do this mating dance where they're close together and then create a super spoon, but magnets do.
Likewise, if I have a magnet and you give me another magnet and I put those 2 magnets together, I'm still going to say that I have 2 magnets because I most likely will be able to pull them apart.
You see, this is just moving the goalposts. You're arbitrarily considering how easy it is to separate a magnet as a condition for there being 2 magnets rather than 1. What if you were a toddler with a quarter of the strength you have now? What if the magnets were welded together? Your definition is even more meaningless than what you're trying to criticize. Okay, now we move to Nigel's discussion of infinity, which he explains here.
I said, you always perceive that infinity looks like that. Whereas if you look at infinity very, very closely, it's actually 2 circles. When you look at 1 circle, it's 360 degrees. Plus 360 degrees means infinity is 720 degrees. Yeah, so what?
This is a pretty well-known identity for Euclidean infinity, but whether or not Planarwalk is pretending to be dense in response, his argument follows as such.
Firstly, this here is just a symbol for an infinity. The characteristics of infinity have nothing to do with the symbol that we assign it.
That's just not true, and you would know if you were familiar with John Wallace's lemon skate representation of infinity.
And also, it is not two circles because no matter how closely I look, I cannot see two circles there.
Topologically equivalent still holds.
And thirdly, 8 is about as close, if not closer, to two circles than infinity is. So does that mean that 8 is 720 degrees?
Yes.
So when you take a magnetic body like so, and you have a north and you have a south, you think that's it. Well, it's not. It goes from there, and then goes around the back, goes over itself, and goes there. And the other one goes the other way. It goes from there, it goes around the back, around the south, and goes there.
Now, I'd like to know what that diagram is actually meant to show, because that doesn't look anything like any magnet I've ever seen. My main question would be, what are those lines even supposed to represent? What is going from north to south? It's certainly not the magnetic field, because the magnetic field does not look like that on a magnet.
If you've never seen magnetic fields that look like this, you're clearly not familiar with magnetology or the magnetic dual space. So these are standard field lines, and these circuit closers at the poles are from the dual space perpendicular to the conventional magnetic field.
I clearly missed the part where he said that a magnet is infinity.
Clearly.
That did upset an awful lot of physicists and mathematicians in the room.
They probably felt that not only was their intelligence being insulted, but you were also actively trying to lower their intelligence. And on top of that, they're probably wondering why you were getting any speaking time and meant to be taken seriously.
So because Planarwalk is either unable or unwilling to engage with Nigel's logic, he responds with anger and condescension because his posturing is all he could do to assert some sort of dominance in the situation, which will work on his audience, but not for the wider population of free thinkers.
If we take a dot and we claim that dot as 0, we can go in a direction for infinity, like so. But it also means we can go the other way for infinity. And therefore, for infinity to exist, it needs to be 2 times infinity.
So it's very important when doing an axis like that if you've got a positive number in a certain direction, the other direction would be a negative number. Now, when you have infinity plus negative infinity, then you actually don't get 0. You'd think you'd get 0, but you actually get undefined. In fact, any operations that you do on infinity, you don't get a number, you don't get infinity, you actually get undefined. Because infinity is more of a concept than an actual number.
Okay, basically all of what Planarwalk just said is wrong. First of all, because we are in the magnetic subspace, we will see that this is more or less existing on the Riemann sphere. So infinity is not a spooky abstract concept, it's a literal fucking point. It's the point at infinity. So when Nigel starts from 0 and goes to infinity on the left, in the spherical pic, he's drawing a ray from one pole at 0, remember magnets, to the other pole at infinity. Now when he draws the opposite ray, he's not going to negative infinity, he's going to the same point. So yes, 2 times infinity is infinity. Maps on the Riemann sphere don't just refuse to map the point at infinity to an output because it's spooky. It's not undefined, it's exactly what you expect. 2 times infinity is infinity. 1 over infinity is 0.
Or, if you can go that way, 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 you can go that way. And anyone who's quite clever, here is the given length in space. And when you do that, you get an arc. Like that. And you do it again. And you do it again. And you do it again. That is pi.
That is a circle, and you have not given any value to it except for saying that it is pi. Now I assume that you're meaning that the circumference is pi, in which case the radius would have to be 0.5 in order to get the circumference of pi.
Bad assumption. He's clearly drawing these lines as equivalence classes in 2-dimensional real projective space. And if you haven't seen how pi arises in these spaces, I suggest you read Noah's article on supergeometry and pi projective space. Also, notice that he never referred to this as a circle in the way he did for the circles in infinity, which are equal to 360 degrees, not pi.
Therefore, because that curve is longer than the straight line like that, it means that pi is greater than infinity. Oops.
Well, no, that line has a finite length.
No, it doesn't.
The only way that you can have an infinitely long line inside of a circle is if that circle has an infinite size. And a circle with an infinite size would have a radius of infinity, and therefore the circumference of that circle would be 2 pi infinity, which would be undefined.
No, that's not true at all. A circle with an infinite radius is just a line. I suggest consulting Alfor's complex analysis for a discussion of Mobius transformations and circles of Apollonius. A line has infinite length. It doesn't just disappear because you're too afraid to touch infinity. Furthermore, constructing the infinite line in that circle would just be drawing a ray to the point at infinity. But the point still stands that an infinite line is just an element of two-dimensional projective space, which is itself pi. So pi is greater than infinity. This brings us to about halfway through Planarwalk's critique. There's some specific stuff that Planarwalk gets wrong, like how E equals mc squared actually has dependence on c as a universal descriptor, and changing that number for the universe in question will change energy. So inside the magnet where there's no speed, the magnet has no Newtonian energy, which proves there's an extra quantity holding the magnet to the board not described by Einstein. But Planarwalk's approach is just more of the same. Misinterpret, deflect, ridicule, claim victory. And if you watch the rest of his output, by and large it's no different. Uncritical snobbery disguised as scientific disagreement. I want to conclude with a more constructive discussion. As much as I dug into Nate's flawed critiques in this video, I have so much respect for the guy. He puts out 3 videos a week, like sizable videos too, and he delivers his points so well. I know he says he doesn't script them, which given how much content he puts out makes sense, but he's so precise with his language that it sounds scripted, and I'm saying that as a compliment. The man is a content creating machine. Also, he's been on the YouTube grind forever, starting out with Flash game Let's Plays that would accumulate 200 views at best. Even though he caught the wave with the Nigel Hands video, it's awesome to see the YouTube algorithm reward someone who clearly just fucking loves to make videos. The flip side though is that now Planarwalk is incentivized to attack the usual alt scientist punching bags regardless of validity, as we've seen here. So I have 3 suggestions for Planarwalk that I think would both serve his content and protect the alternative science community from frivolous ridicule. I want to give a big shout out to my $20 patrons, and between you and me, thank you for watching.